So many of the opposites that we experience, these like binaries of having to hold two different positions, really come down to a misunderstanding between liberation and power. Because in yoga, there are only two paths. There's liberation and there's power. And when we're going for liberation, it looks very different. Liberation is the ability to hold two different things, two opposites at the same time. Because we carry this ability within ourselves. We can hold grief and joy at the exact same time. We can hold anxiety and spaciousness, deep peace and unrest. We hold so many different complex abilities simultaneously. But when we are stuck in a power dynamic, we no longer are able to hold our complexity. We have to take our stake and put it into the ground. And this is how we get different power dynamics. Power dynamics like taking power by being a victim, taking power by being a perpetrator. Each one of these has a power dynamic. In the traditions of yoga, it is often said that power and liberation are very closely related. As a matter of fact, some texts don't even judge which one you're going for. You can follow these practices for power or for liberation without any kind of comment or judgment on which one you're following as a practitioner. Because the path is so similar until really one critical point, they really look the same. And so a lot of times we think we're going for power, say, but then we get into this place of incredible potency, incredible power, total focus and determination, and realize, oh, I'm actually able to go a little further into liberation. Sometimes we think that we're going for liberation, and in fact, what we find is we're really in it for power. So what's the difference? Liberation is the ability to hold our opposites. It's the ability to be complex. It's when we know that we're willing to lay ourselves down for the process, when the process is more important than the goal, where it's more interesting to ask, where am I developing here? Where is my curiosity here? Over how am I right? How are you wrong? Right? So right and wrong, when you have to take a stake and put it in the ground, when you have to claim one side over another side, when you take power over somebody else by being a victim and saying, you did this, or you become a perpetrator and you enact a crime, both of those are positions of power. And the point is that we really are going for the depth of the heart in these practices, in these traditions, in these lineages, especially when it comes to Tantra, and especially in the parts of Tantra that are more clearly looking at the divine feminine and the goddess. Why? Because the goddess represents life, and she really represents power. She represents that which vibrates into existence, which comes forth as an empowerment. So especially on this path where vibration is included, the body is included, relationships within the self and within the world, we have to talk about power. And we have to talk about power, understanding how seductive it is, even when we know we're really going for liberation. You can have tastes of liberation. You can immerse yourself in experiences of transcendence and the void, and still fall back down that level into power. And this is really what happens with unethical gurus, unethical teachers, even the ones that have immersed themselves in transcendence, the ones even that may have access to some levels of awareness or the void. But if they're toggling back down again and again and empowering themselves in a way that says, I'm right and you're wrong, or they take a position, or they injure, they hurt, or they take some kind of a goal-oriented approach. All that matters is this one goal. All that matters is this one way, and I'm right and I'm the way. That's when you know somebody has dropped away from liberation and is back in power, right? So it's not like you hit liberation and you stay there forever. Liberation is just a touch point of an open and pulsating heart. Liberation really is the ability not so much to be a teacher, but to be a friend, to be able to say to somebody, hey friend, I know that we live in opposition. I know that opposites rule where we are here. I know that this is the complex, but how is that complex bringing you back to the truth of your heart, to the agency of your heart, to the sovereignty of your heart? This idea of sovereignty is so important when we're talking about the divine feminine, when we're talking about the goddess, because sovereignty as this pulsation of reality, as this empowering forth into life, is the way that we keep going through the power. And when you culminate in power, when you find that single pointed focus, where is it going to lead? It's going to lead to a whole and complete integrated heart, right? And that's that almost invisible line. You can't go for power and liberation at the same time, because if you're going for both, you're really just going for liberation, right? Because that line, once it gets crossed, liberation subsumes all of it. There's a great story in one of the sacred texts about a virus that takes total devotion, total dedication, and total focus, does all the prostrations, does all of the mantra repetitions, does all of the prayers, does all of the austerities for so long that it starts to gain power. And it keeps gaining power, and it keeps gaining power, and it starts going into these like God realms. And yet it remains hungry. It's a virus, so it remains hungry. So the hunger is still there, and the hunger is still there. So it keeps going for more power and more power and more power, right? So anything that we put our single focused, undivided attention on is going to yield deeper and deeper power. But what is that power in service of? Is it to feed our hunger, to keep us hungry, to keep us going in this state of needing that one thing, needing that stake in the ground? Or are we willing to get to a certain pace to wisely use that focus and discernment, to wisely use all of those specific practices and actually pierce the complex heart, where all of life is available and whole and complete? Because you could take this story of this virus that is meditating and doing all of the prostrations and doing all of the practice, and you can carry it all the way forward into absolute liberation. Liberation doesn't need to happen at the moment of death. In some traditions, it is said that liberation can only happen at the time of death, but that's not true. Liberation can only happen at the time of death when we're trying to go beyond or past form, when we're going beyond the goddess, when we're taking all of the vibration of Shakti, when we're taking all of the power and we're trying to move beyond it. When we say that's an illusion, when we say that's unreal, when we say only stillness is real, then liberation can only happen when you've left this realm of pulsation, this realm of body, this realm of Shakti, this realm of form. But when you start to turn back to the goddess, when you start to turn back to the heart, when you have the capacity to hold complexity, to hold opposites, you no longer need to wait for liberation at the time of death. Liberation is simply the understanding that the heart is whole and complete in a state of total vibration, exactly as it is. At that point, you can stand at that cusp and roll back in. You can take the mirror and let it shine back in. You can allow an amplification to hold the complex. You can sit with grief in total compassion, because grief is an emanation of this heart. We have all touched in on pain. We have all touched in on suffering. We have all touched in on grief. We have all touced in on joy. And when we go deeper into these realms, we're able to hold both. That is the magic of this Jivan Mukti, this being liberated while alive. not because you're in a place that's higher than, not because you're standing at the podium and putting on a voice of transmission, not because you should listen to me because I'm telling you something special, but because you're a friend. When you become a spiritual friend to somebody, you're able to sit down in the mud. You're able to say to them, yeah, I've been there and it hurts. And you know what? I might be there again tomorrow and it'll hurt. So it's the ability to hold the complex without having to be above it all, without having to have your stake, because that's not liberation, that's power.